everybody, Victoria Lampini here, and I think it's about time that we take a look at my book again. It's been a long time since I've read this, so I really wanted to do it again, make another video of it, a fresh video, you know what I mean? Okay, so let's open it to one of my favorite stories. Let's start with this one, Fafnir. Whoops. The legend of Fafnir, it's from Norse mythology. The sword Gram was no ordinary weapon. It was forged long ago from the rich mines of the dwarf king Hreidmar, whose son Prince Regin was a talented smith, able to shape any armor or sword from gold or bronze. His skill made Hreidmar's other son, Fafnir, wrathful with jealousy. When the mighty bronze Gram was shaped on the dwarven prince's anvil, Regin knew at once that this was a blade of unequal craftsmanship and unmatched power. The god Odin decreed that only one worthy of the blade should be allowed to wield it, and he bestowed the sword to Sigrid, king of the Volsungs, who brandished Gram for many years, vanquishing his enemies and becoming a mighty lord. Eventually, however, Odin decided that Gram and Sigrid had become too powerful, so during a battle, he caused Gram to shatter, and Sigrid fell to his enemies. The kingdom of the Volsungs was lost, and the queen and her son Sigurd fled to the countryside. During this time, Fafnir's jealousy toward his father and his brother Regin had grown, and he coveted the golden dwarven hoard for his own. Twisted and tormented by his greed, Fafnir transformed into a powerful dragon that breathed poison and fouled the lands of the dwarves in perpetual winter, driving the dwarves from their ancestral halls. King Hreidmar confronted his son. "Fafnir, what have you done?" "I have taken what is rightfully mine, father. Now I will be the king of the Golden Hall." Fafnir then fell upon his father and slew him. Prince Regin and the dwarves of Hreidmar fled the Golden Hall and went into hiding, far away from the wrath of Fafnir. But Prince Regin vowed to return one day to avenge the king and take back their homeland. While taking refuge in the wilderness, Regin met the exiled Prince Sigurd, also on the run from his enemies, and together they plotted to kill Fafnir and share the golden hoard. Sigurd revealed that he had the shards of Gram, which was once wielded by his father. The dwarven prince took the shards and reforged a legendary sword, perhaps the only weapon powerful enough to kill Fafnir. Bearing the sword Gram, Sigurd set off into the frozen mountains to seek out the lair of Fafnir. After many treacherous days of traveling, Sigurd came upon the icy dwarven halls and entered the great chamber filled with the golden treasure that Fafnir had stolen from his father and brother. Coiled atop the piles of gems and coins, the dragon woke from his slumber at the arrival of the warrior. "So, My brother has sent a mortal man to try and slay the great Fafnir, the dragon hissed. My father and brother conspired against me. They wished to keep the treasure of the dwarves for themselves, but I was too powerful for them. The gold is now mine, and no mortal man shall take it from me. The great monster reared up to his full height, his skin flecked with scales that shimmered gold. Sigrid drew Gram from its sheath and brandished it before Fafnir. The dragon seemed to recognize the blade, and he suddenly hunched down, wary of the intruder in his cave. You know this blade, Sigrid shouted. The sword Gram, wielded by my father, reforged by your brother Regin. Fafnir hissed and snapped his jaws at Sigurd, who stepped aside just in time to evade the bite. The warrior and the beast carefully circled one another, each searching for an advantage. The warrior swung the blade, catching Fafnir along the side, but so thick and powerful were his scales that even the enchanted blade of Gram glanced off his armor. Over and over the two combatants struck, and with every powerful swing of the sword, Sigurd failed to scratch the mighty dragon, much less pierce his hide. Fafnir then belched a cloud of smoke over the warrior. Choking and eyes burning, Sigurd stumbled away from Fafnir and ran hastily from the hall back to the icy wind-swept mountain cliffs. Fafnir laughed and taunted Sigurd as he fled. You cannot run, Gram Wielder. You cannot escape the mighty Fafnir. Blinded by Fafnir's poisonous breath and a forceful wind, Sigurd stumbled and fell into an unseen crevice in the ice. He was not injured too severely in the fall, but when Fafnir emerged from the cave searching for him, Sigurd realized that he was concealed within the icy crack. Come out, little man. Hiding will do you no good, Fafnir snarled. Wedged in the open crevice, Sigurd slowly moved into a crouched position and grasped the hilt of Gram in his frozen fingers as, above him, Fafnir prowled in the snow. As the dragon loomed overhead, Sigurd saw from his low vantage a bare spot in the dragon's chest where the scales did not cover a pale patch of flesh. Fafnir suddenly swung his head around and spied Sigurd in the crevice. There you are. I found you, little man. Fafnir bared his teeth to finish Sigurd, but the warrior thrust the blade upward with all his might. The magic blade of Gram found its spot and sank hilt deep into Fafnir's chest. The mighty dragon let out a terrible scream of anguish and toppled into the snow. Sigurd pulled himself from the crack and stood ready to strike again, but the dragon was in his death throes. What is your name, Grand Wielder? Fafnir choked. I am Sigurd, son of Sigmund, king of the Volsungs, the young man proclaimed. Fafnir laughed, a hideous sound from the beast's throat. Do not think that by killing me you are safe, princeling. Do you think my brother will let you live and share his gold? With that, Fafnir let out a last breath and did not move again. Having vanquished the terrible serpent, Sigurd returned to his homeland with Gram and golden treasures from the Horde, and reclaimed his brother's throne to become king of the Volsungs. There's Fafnir right here. quite amazing that he was once a dwarf, and tormented by his hatred and his greed and selfishness, transformed into an evil dragon. Quite incredible, isn't it? What a story. On to the next one. Next story up, we have Madian. A story of a battle between two great dragons. This story is Welsh. The people in ancient Wales lived during a time of great prosperity under the wise and noble King Lud, but it came to pass that the lands of Britain and Wales were set upon by a terrible cataclysm. The earth shook with violent tremors, causing rocks and boulders to crash into homes. The air boiled with smoke, and the heat devastated the crops and livestock. Even the king's castle shook so terribly that the walls crumbled. The Welsh people begged their king to save them. King Lud listened to their cries and ventured out into the mountains to discover the source of the tremors. In a valley at the foot of Snowdonia, he came upon two titanic dragons battling one another, one white and the other red. The mighty red dragon was the symbol and pride of Wales, but there in the valley, the red dragon was embroiled in a terrible battle with a white dragon of the north, a scourge from the icy lands over the sea. Together, the two titans shrieked and bellowed, spewing gouts of flame all around them in massive swaths and tearing up the land. At night, the two monsters would fall exhausted to sleep in the alley below, only to resume their combat again in the morning. Children cried in their cribs while their parents starved, and the walls of the villages crumbled from the terrible quaking of the earth. "Great King Lud," the people begged, "save us from the dragons." Lud was a brave and noble lord. Mounting his horse and bearing his shield and spear, he rode out with his best champions to try to stop the dragons. The land all around the monsters was torn and broken. The fire and smoke from their battle made the earth quake so that no warrior could stand, and the air was so choked with sulphurous smoke that they could not breathe. Many warriors were crushed by the beast's flailing claws and strangled by the dragon's fumes. At night, the two beasts fell exhausted into a restless sleep in the valley of the mountains, allowing Lud and his knights to escape. Nothing the knights did could stop the beasts, so King Lud sought out the sage counsel of the ancient wizard Merlin. Lud traveled throughout the many kingdoms of Britain trying to find the sorcerer, but wizards who do not wish to be found are rarely discovered. At long last, deep in a cave, Lud came upon the venerable seer. "Merlin, I beseech you," Lud said. "The lands are beset by a terrible war of dragons, and the people are suffering. Please tell me how to get rid of the Please tell me how to rid the kingdom of this plague." Merlin stroked his long gray beard, and his eyes seemed to glow with mischief from under his dark hood. "I shall tell you, great king," Merlin said in a gravely voice. "First, you must dig a great pit in the center of the valley, and then you must fill the pit with honeymead. When the dragons come next to do battle, they will crawl into the pit, drink the mead, and fall into a stupor and be unable to rouse themselves. Once the dragons are asleep, you must bury them deep in the earth so that their wrath should not destroy all the land. King Lud thanked the old sage and raced back to his people. He did as the wizard instructed and gathered all his knights and soldiers to dig the pit in the valley. 1,000 wagons brought kegs of honey mead from all over the kingdom to fill the hole so that it looked like a lake. Once again, the red and white dragons came to the valley to do battle. Before they could begin to fight, the two terrible lizards spied the pool of honey mead and went to the edge to drink. Lud and his men watched as the dragons drank and then crawled deep into the pit to reach the last of the sweet brew. Before long, the dragons had fallen asleep at the bottom of the pit. All together, the king and his men used shovels and spades to bury the great dragons. By morning, the pit had been filled, and the dragons' battles no longer plagued the kingdom of Wales. The king decided to commemorate the great battle by emblazoning the red dragon on his coat of arms. Today, the same dragon embellishes every flag of Wales. As the years passed, the people were no longer troubled by dragons, although smoke can sometimes be seen issuing from the earth where the dragons lie buried. Wow, a story of a battle between dragons. Quite extraordinary, isn't it? I love dragon battles. Next story we have Python. The Legend of Python. This is the Greek tale. Yay, Greek. Hera, the queen of the gods, was terribly jealous. King Zeus was an unfaithful husband, romancing the young and beautiful goddess Leda. Before long, Leda became pregnant with Zeus's child and was ready to give birth. This enraged Hera, who did not want to share her family with another woman. She was afraid of the threat the child might become, so she harassed Leda and brought forth the serpent Python, a monstrous and terrible worm that presided over Mount Parnassus, the home of the temple of the Oracle of Delphi. Python was a creature of destruction and poison that breathed clouds of foul, sulphurous smoke that choked all life. Fearing for her child, Leda traveled far from her home to give birth and raise her child. Leda gave birth to twins, Artemis and Apollo. The young god Apollo was a handsome boy like his mother and powerful like his father. Growing up in exile, Apollo vowed to return to the world, but the desolation wrought by Python made the land uninhabitable. Apollo decided he would need to slay the dragon and rid the world of its wasteland. Knowing that Python was created by Hera, Apollo understood that only the most powerful of weapons could slay him. The young god knew of only one god talented enough to create such a weapon. Apollo traveled deep into the underworld in search of his half-brother, Hephaestus, who had been thrown out of the palace of heavens by his mother, Hera, for his birth deformities. Apollo found Hephaestus toiling at his forge and anvil, and Apollo described what he intended to do. Any plan to undo the designs of his mother was to efface his liking, so the two brothers schemed over their mutual hatred of Queen Hera. Hephaestus agreed to make a powerful silver bow with golden arrows for Apollo. Seek out the oracle who lives in a cave on the slopes of Mount Parnassus in the shadow of Python, Hephaestus explained. She will be able to help you in slaying the monster. When it was completed, the beautiful bow and arrows gleamed in the firelight of the forge. Apollo armored himself in a breastplate and shield given to him by his brother and set out to slay Python. The wasteland of Python was a barren expanse of jagged rocks and stinking smoke where no living thing could thrive. Not a tree or a bird lived in that valley of death. Apollo crept warily to the cave on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the oracle made her home, careful not to rouse the great serpent. Inside the smoke-filled temple, Apollo found the oracle sitting on her throne. Son of Zeus, the oracle spoke without opening her eyes. You have come to free this land from the curse of Python. I have, said Apollo, but I do not know how to slay the dragon of Hera. Python is a powerful creature, given life by Hera, the queen of gods herself, in order to plague this land so that Leta and her children would have no place to rest, the oracle explained. To fell the beast, you must pierce one of its eyes with your golden arrow. Only this will destroy Python's dominion over the land. Apollo was wary but steeled himself for the task by thinking of his beloved mother and his contempt for Hera. He crept from the cave of the oracle in search of the dragon. He climbed across the jagged rocks where the serpent dwelled and called the creature out. Great and terrible Python, thrall of Hera, come out and meet your doom at the hands of Apollo, son of Zeus, Apollo shouted. The ground shook with the coming of Python. The giant serpent filled the landscape, and its mighty jaws boiled with fire like the volcanoes of Thera. The glowing embers of its many eyes lit the smoky darkness of the land. The coils of Python racked the ground like an earthquake. Apollo struggled to keep his footing as the very rocks of the earth split open under the terrible serpent's armored scales. Apollo drew forth the bow and arrow of Hephaestus and aimed unerringly at the eyes of Python as the oracle had instructed him. Before he could release the arrow, another tremor cracked the fissure open at Apollo's feet. He leapt just as the ground beneath his fell away. He leapt just as the ground beneath his feet fell away, but he landed hard on the rocky ground, spilling the arrows from his pouch. Python's thundering steps pounded closer, and Apollo looked up at Python's eyes as the beast loomed over him. Apollo snatched an arrow from the rocky and deftly notched the shaft. He drew back the powerful string and released. The loose arrow flew true to its mark and pierced the serpent's eye. The mighty serpent thrashed and whipped its powerful body in its death throes, bellowing in screams that rent the sky like crashes of thunder, before it fell lifeless to the earth at the feet of Apollo with a tremendous crash. With the death of the titanic monster, the smoke blew out of the valley and the sun broke through the clouds. Apollo buried the body of Python at the foot of Mount Parnassus, and the site became known as Pythia. Before long, The wasteland of the serpent was transformed into a beautiful valley, and a sacred temple was erected on the site. For years to come, the faithful would hold games and feasts to celebrate the victory of Apollo over Python. All right. Check out this dragon. It's called a worm. It's a snake dragon. Amazing, right? Next tale, the 4 Dragon Kings. I just love multi-headed dragons. But, well, I'll explain in the story. This is a Chinese tale. In ancient China, there dwelt 4 brothers known as the 4 Dragon Kings. Celine the Green, who lived in his castle by the East China Sea, controlled the season of spring. Zulong the Red, who lived in his castle by the South China Sea, was ruler of the summer. Bai Long the White, who lived in his castle in the west at Quinai Lake, controlled the season of autumn. And Heilong the Black, who lived in the north at Lake Baikal, controlled the season of winter. Together, the 4 brothers kept peace and prosperity ruling over the many kingdoms of China, bringing rains in the spring, warm summers for the growing season, cool nights for the autumn harvest, and snow in winter. The people loved the 4 brothers and made offerings to them at the many temples built in their honor. In one small village lived a young girl named Liwa, who adored the 4 Dragon Kings. Every 6th moon, Liwa would travel far from home to the Temple of the Dragon Kings, where she would burn incense, recite her vows, and march in the many processions to show her love for the dragon gods. "Why do you travel so far to pray to the dragons?" Liwa's friends teased her. "You are just one little girl. Do you think that the great and powerful dragon gods notice you and hear your offerings?" Liwa took no notice because she knew that it was not important whether the dragon gods noticed her. It was only important that she showed them her respect, that even the smallest person could make a difference. Not everyone loved the 4 brothers. An evil sorcerer named Wu Peng resented the power the brothers held and was jealous of the love the people had for them. Wu Peng dreamed of possessing the powers of the 4 Dragon Kings and could then rule all of China himself. The sorcerer learned that there existed a powerful dragon orb that would be able to control the 4 brothers. So Wu Peng set out on a quest to find it, and, at long last, in an ancient temple on a mountain, he found the orb and set in an ornate staff. Wu Peng struck the great dragon orb staff into the rock and called, "Great dragon brothers, I, Wu Peng, summon you from the 4 corners of the world to do my bidding." Unable to resist the powerful lure of the orb, the 4 brothers were torn away from their kingdoms and brought to the mountaintop where Wu Peng stood. Though their powers were mighty, the Dragon Kings were bound by the power of the orb. The dragons thrashed in torment as they struggled, but alas, the terrible wizard wrested control of the 4 Dragon Kings. Anguished inside but under Wu Peng's spell, the dragons followed his horrific instructions to devastate the land and bring many kingdoms under Wu Peng's rule. The people abandoned their farms and the cities to seek shelter in the mountains. The rain from Qinlong washed away the farms. The fires from Zulong burned the trees. The icy sleet from Heilong froze the birds in the sky, and Bailong breathed choking smoke that blotted out the sun. Together the four brothers terrorized the land they loved and were powerless to stop the evil sorcerer. The young girl Liwa wished to help the four brothers and stayed behind when her parents fled the village. "What can you do?" her parents asked. "You are just one little girl. You cannot make a difference." Undeterred, Liwa ran through the dark landscape to find the castle of Wu Peng where the four dragon brothers rested on the mountaintop. "I am here to help you," Liwa said to the brothers. The dragon kings looked tired and defeated. "You cannot help us, little girl. Be gone before the wizard awakes and finds you," Qinlong said to her. "But there must be something I can do," Liwa said. "The great dragon orb must be destroyed," Heilong whispered. "Only that will set us free." In the night while Wu Peng slept, Liwa scrambled up the mountain to the castle. The castle was guarded by terrible demons, but Liwa was small and able to sneak past them. She wandered through the halls of the castle until she came to the hall of Wu Peng. A powerful warrior would not have been able to break through the iron doors, but Liwa was little and slipped unnoticed through a crack in the wall. Inside, Wu Peng slept on his golden throne with the great dragon orb staff resting beside him. Silently, she crept up to the throne, took hold of the staff, and slipped it away from Wu Peng's grasp. The wizard suddenly awoke and was startled to find Liwa holding the great dragon orb in her little hands. "What are you doing, little girl?" he sneered. "Give that to me." Liwa lifted the orb over her head and with all of her might smashed it at her feet. A blinding flash and crack of thunder accompanies Wu Peng's shriek of horror. "No!" Outside the castle, a great roar bellowed through the air, a cry of rage from the furious dragon kings. At once the roof of the castle was torn off and the dragon kings, released from the power of the orb, turned their fury on Wu Peng. He screamed as they snatched him up and swallowed him. The four brothers were eternally grateful to Liwa for saving them from their enslavement to Wu Peng. Zulong let Liwa climb on his back, and the dragon kings flew the one who made a difference back home to her village where her parents embraced her. The four dragon kings returned to their own castles where they live to this day, ruling over the four corners of China and bringing prosperity and good fortune to all. Amazing, right? I think this is the form they took under Wu Peng's control because usually they're separate dragons. Yeah. This is a story I recently got into. It's about the saint that my church is named after, the dragon of Celine. Pretty cool, huh? That's a drake, a four-legged wingless dragon. This is a Christian tale. So it's something out of the titles of the Bible. Really cool that we have dragon stories there too. During the rule of the Roman Empire, the Emperor Diocletian decreed that all of the soldiers within the imperial army would denounce the new Christian faith and declare their loyalty to the Roman gods. Across the empire, from Britain to Jerusalem, the legions of the imperial army pronounced their faith to the emperor and the Roman gods for fear of being executed. Roman governor Gerontius was a loyal general of the empire who ruled in the eastern province of Syria and was beloved by the emperor. However, the general and his wife, Polychronia, were secret converts to Christianity, and when they had a son, they named him George and raised him in the new Christian faith. George's parents knew that practicing their faith in violation of the emperor's edict placed him in grave danger. When George grew to a young man, he followed in his father's footsteps and became a soldier in the Roman army. George was a brave and noble soldier, quickly rising up the ranks to become a centurion. Throughout the lands of Syria where he had grown up, he was known as a fair and courageous warrior, devout in his Christian faith. As time passed, George's adventures took him to the lands of Libya in northern Africa. One day, as George was riding through the kingdom, he came upon the city of Salian, where once there had been fields of crops and orchards. Now he saw only blackened land and water that steamed like sulfur. He approached the city walls to see what had happened, and there he found a young noblewoman. "Sir," she cried, "I beg you, turn and ride away from this accursed place if you value your life." George was dismayed and asked her what was wrong. "A dragon," she wailed. "A dragon has come to our city and has destroyed all of our lands." "How is this possible?" George asked. The lady told him her story. "A year ago, a terrible dragon came to live in our kingdom and terrorized the land, ate our livestock, and destroyed our crops with its foul, poisonous breath. The beast sounded death and destruction upon our fair city of Salian. My father, the king, tried to placate the beast by feeding our livestock and animals to it, but soon they were all gone, and a terrible bargain was made. The king began a lottery to choose young boys and girls to be sacrificed to the dragon to keep it satisfied. In time, I could not abide by the lottery, so I put my own name in. It befell that I was chosen, the princess of Celine, to be sacrificed to the dragon. My father begged me not to go, but I refused, insisting that the peril my fellow townspeople endured should be mine as well. So now I have left the city gates to be sacrificed to the dragon on behalf of my people. Please, good knight, flee, for the dragon will soon be upon us, and you would surely be destroyed as well." All of a sudden, a fearsome growl came from the blackened river that flowed nearby. A massive, lurking drake skulked along the strand. Its eyes burned like fire, and black smoke boiled from its nostrils like a furnace. Stopping in its gait upon spying the knight on horseback, the terrible creature opened its toothed maw and issued a roar that echoed through the desolate landscape. Without hesitation, George wheeled his horse around and set his lance under his arm. This was no ordinary spear, The lance of Ascalon was a holy relic originally gifted to the mighty hero Ajax, and then brought to the city of Ascalon, where George acquired the sacred weapon through his piety and faith. Charging his horse toward the scaly beast, George directed the lance at the dragon's heart. With a thundering crash, George struck true into the dragon, and, with a wail of pain, the creature reared up and was thrown backward, crashing into the river. Wheeling his horse around for a second charge, George could see at once that the beast was beaten. Limping and wounded, the dragon rose tremulously to its feet and snapped and snarled at the princess and the knight. "Your Highness," George called to the princess, "your sash! Take your sash and throw it over the creature's head!" The princess bravely followed the knight's command and took the long silk sash from around her waist and cast it toward the dragon, where it looped itself around the creature's neck. At first, the dragon bucked at the leash, but it soon realized it was beaten and became as tame as a house dog. Together, the princess and George led the dragon toward the city gates of Salian, where the whole town had stood upon the parapets watching the ordeal. "Open the gates!" cried the princess. With a squeal of iron, the portcullis rose, and the great oaken gates swung wide to let in the champions. Every citizen of Celine gathered around the holy knight and the princess trailing the terrible dragon. The beast gave a ferocious shriek at the thronging crowd, which caused them all to shrink back in horror. "Good people of Celine," called George, "you have nothing to fear from this evil creature. With one stroke of the holy lance of Ascalon, and with your princess's brave virtue, he has been defeated by the grace of God." The citizens of Celine knew this had to be true, that they had witnessed a miracle that day. One by one, the townsfolk fell to their knees in thanks to God, and there in the town square of Celine, St. George baptized 20,000 souls. Cool. That's definitely a drake. Yeah, may not have wings, but it's definitely a dragon. That's enough stories for now. Thanks for watching.